Welcome back to the lecture series on ethics and corporate governance. This lecture is going to focus on giving you an insight about corporate governance, and specifically this corporate governance is focusing on the Indian administrative systems. Now the first thing is to understand that what is corporate governance. There are two terms which are being used over here. One is corporate and the other one is governance. When you talk about corporate, we are talking about the business world. The system of administration or the system of governance basically is how you are going to keep monitoring and how you are going to make it more and more easier in the functioning and overall management of governance over the corporate organizations in India. In the last decade, corporate frauds and governance failure is occurring frequently, and which is why we require good corporate governance in the country. Though we have a lot of measures, a lot of acts and provisions which makes it easier to monitor, but there is some other lacuna that is there that is basically keeping us behind. India provides a proper norms and laws aligned with the international requirement to govern a corporate house. Some of the important issues and reasons are discussed below in the why we need to have really good corporate governance in India. A corporate has a lot of shareholders with different attitudes towards corporate affairs. Corporate governance protects the shareholders' democracy by implementing it through the Act Code of Conduct. Now, in simple terms, when we think about corporate governance, because it's a country where large, small, and medium-sized organizations are there, or business organizations are there, it becomes a challenge to manage the company because they are influencing the decision making when it comes to the large organizations. Corporate governance is basically setting the code of conduct to deal with such situations. It is necessary to build public confidence because remember, we are dealing with stakeholders. Stakeholders are the people who have a direct stake in the government or in the stake in the administration of the organization. Why? Because they have invested in the firm in some other way. It is important for reviewing the confidence of everyone who is a stakeholder, whether it's an investor, employee, or maybe any vendor who is associated with the big business. Society having a great expectations from the corporate house expect that they are going to provide an environment which is following with the code of conduct and also fulfilling the expectations of all these stakeholders. Globalization is one of the key element which has basically led to having a strong code of conduct because now you're not only having your national, regional or state level organizations but also international companies or MNCs coming into the corporate world. Globalization made the communication and transport between country easy and frequent. So many Indian companies are listed with international stock exchange, which also triggers the need of corporate governance in India. The huge flow of international capital in Indian companies are also affecting the management of Indian corporates, which requires a proper code of conduct to be implemented and adapted. The Indian framework on corporate governance has wisely be in sync with the international standards, and it is described in the following two important elements like the Companies Act of 2013, which was basically initiated in the year 1956 and it was amended in the year 2013, which has certain provisions concerning independent directors, board constitution, general meeting, board meetings, board processes, related party transaction and audit committees, which are very important and integral part of an organization. SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India, basically gives a clear guidelines to ensure the protection of investors who and have mandated the companies to adhere with the best practices mentioned in these guidelines. In simple terms, corporate governance has a vision, mission, strategy, and objective to achieve SMART goals, which are basically with the help of uh, policies and procedures, board of directors and committees, legal regulatory frameworks, organizational hierarchy, monitoring by internal as well as external sources, and thereby creating a transparent and more accountable governance for all the people who have a direct stake in the government, in the organization's governance. Then we have the accounting standard issued by the ICAI, which is Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, wherein the ICAI is an autonomous body and issues accounting standards. The disclosure of financial statement are also mandated by the ICAI backed by the Companies Act 2013, Section 129. Standard listing agreements and stock exchange applies to the companies where shares are listed on various stock exchanges. Secretarial standards issued by ICSI, which is the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, issues standards of meeting of the board of directors, general meeting. The Companies Act also empowers this autonomous body to provide standards which each and every company is required to adhere so that they have not been punished under the Companies Act itself. Now, though there have been a lot of provisions made, but still we have certain issues. Some of them have been very briefly explained over here. Although there exist many issues in the field of corporate governance, specifically in India, the efforts have been made to highlight the major ones like the board performance. The board of directors or maybe the thinking tank of the organization are playing a very important role. In the Indian provision, we have at least one director has to be female because gender sensitivity has to be taken into care. But it has been found that what has been given is not being adhered. Independent directors are appointed for a reason which does not seem to be fulfilled in the current scenario, even after the SEBI guideline being issued to the corporates for the appointment of an audit committee for giving a comprehensive definition of independent directors. The actual situation is very, very worse. Accountability to stakeholders. Remember, the company is because of the people, the stakeholders. So there is an essential requirement or accountability towards stakeholders which is not being taken care of. Risk management. Definitely, this is not being done in the most sincere manner as required for the job. Privacy and data protection. It is very, very important that good corporate governance norms have to be achieved only not only by the directors and other leaders, but also other people who are associated with the company. CSR or corporate social responsibility, being among the few countries to legislate, it is mandatory for the companies to invest minimum 2% of the profit in the last 3 years for the CSR activities. Otherwise, proper reasons should be mentioned in the report of case of failure. Now, there is one very important aspect which is the principal and agent relationship. So, in the conflict of interest, how this will be taken care of. Principal agent relationship. Now, when we talk about an organization, it can be an agency also. How you define an agency in the sense of a corporate governance. The definition of an agency is a group of people that perform some specific task or that helps us others in some way. A business that takes care of all the details of the proper planning helps to trip this this agency problem. Now, when it comes to understanding the agency theory with agency of the third party, the agency problem is a conflict of interest in any relationship with one party is expected to act in another way or in the best possible interest. In corporate finance, agency problem usually refers to the conflict of interest between a company's management and the company's stockholders or stakeholders. It is very common that it can be observed in most and almost all organizations, irrespective of the fact that these things are being neglected. So the agency problem, it is basically which is basically of due to the conflict of interest taking place that is there between people. This has to be taken care of. Otherwise, it can be misused as well. In the recent past, when it comes to the recent changes which have been made, the Kotek Committee recommendation for corporate governance has been one of the vital things to be considered. In this, there has been a lot of things which have been discussed, like it has submitted the report in the year 2017, and it has given certain instructions to the SEBI. This is one of them, and this basically sums up the module. In the next lecture on corporate governance, we are going to focus on the recent trends in corporate governance. Till then, keep learning.